Welcome to Grieving Insomniacs. I am your host, Christy Haberman. I am glad you're here. Thanks for being a part of our community. A few disclaimers before we get started. I am a licensed therapist. However, this podcast is not to be considered mental health therapy or counseling. It is for entertainment purposes only and is not associated with my counseling practice, Christy Haberman Counseling Services. Thanks for showing up. Welcome to Grieving Insomniacs. This is your host, Christy Haberman, and today we are going to talk about tips with coping with the family reunion. So I was not prepared for the experiences of the last week, and I just not sure why. In my mind, in hindsight, looking back, I think I should have known. But isn't that what we said when our children died too? Well, we should have known. We should have known this was going to happen or that was going to happen, but it never works out that way, does it? Well, it didn't work out that way for me too. So I did not anticipate how hard it would be. My dad and my youngest son and my brother and sister, their significant others, and miss Chris so acutely. And I don't know how else to explain it. On the 4th of July, we went to Devil's Tower to hike, which is in Wyoming. It was really rainy and not nice here on the 4th of July or the 5th of July, actually. And so I went hiking, and it was pretty much a good day, but it got harder on Friday, and that's when everybody was coming to my house for a barbecue. It was also my birthday, and I just felt like not talking, not communicating with anyone. I just was sitting there, and I was also unbelievably tired. And I think to myself, why was I so unbelievably tired? And I had been tired probably for a week or two before that, but I'm talking way beyond tired. I'm talking like 12 hours, 13 hours of sleep for the 2 or 3 weeks before that. And then the whole week that my family was here from out of town. And I was just so tired. Being around people was hard. And they were talking about, oh, what are your kids doing? What are your kids doing? I don't know if that conversation is ever going to stop being triggering. And everybody was like, oh, you look like you're really tired. And I was really tired. But I'm wondering if my tiredness was an expression of how I was feeling emotionally. Anxious attachment, which I have, is that you tend to have more physical symptoms of your grief. And so that may be true, but I also got sick, like coughing and sneezing, and I 100% believe that might be a manifestation of the grief also. You're not going to be prepared for being triggered. I most certainly wasn't. I was not prepared. I don't even think I recognized that I was triggered until maybe last night. It was all over. So my dad's birthday party was on Saturday, and that's where all his friends come, and he's introducing everybody, and my brother's there, and my sister's there, and the grandkids, and you just feel so acutely that someone is missing from your family. And I also caught myself being kind of negative. And I'm like, why are you so negative, Christy? And my brother asked me a question, and I'm like, well, I just don't, since Christopher died, I just don't really feel like I have a lot of passion in my life anymore. Not passionate about life the way I used to be. I'm not passionate about my career like I used to be. It seems like it's a moot point nowadays, because that's not what my focus in life is on. My focus in life, I don't know what it's on, actually. On this podcast, I spend a lot of time counseling grieving people. I have a couple of clients I still have that I still work with. And that would be my focus. And that's part of the reason why I'm not doing counseling as a business anymore, is because I wanted to focus on grieving people. And I live in a really small rural area, and it was really not enough to sustain a full-time practice. What I found is people tended to drop out at 6 months, and that's when actually the depression gets worse, in my opinion, with grief, is that 6-month mark. Probably for the next 18 months is really difficult. People isolate. I know that was true for me. People isolate, they don't interact with other people, they're acutely aware of their differences. And that's one thing that, if you're a non-griever and you're listening to this podcast, I want you to understand that the loss of a child sets you apart from everybody else in the room. And you know it. You know it, and you can feel it, and you understand it. You don't like it, but you know it. And I do. And I stood back, and I was in a room full of people and didn't feel included because I had lost a child, because they can't relate to me anymore. They can't relate to my experiences. They can't relate to my sadness. They can't relate. And I'm sure that when my back was turned, there was a lot of conversation about how different I was. But I'm not going to apologize for it. I'm just not going to apologize for it, because you go through a life-changing experiences and your priorities changed. Mine most definitely did. My focus now is on family, spending time with family, spending time with my grandkids, spending time with my husband, and especially now after the loss of Kai, I really appreciate the times I spent with her, and I really miss her. And I realized that those are the important things in life. I still have to work a job because I'm like everybody else in the world. I have to financially sustain myself, just like my husband. We financially sustain each other, and so you have to do a job. But there's other ways to live your life. My sister has this new boyfriend that you can tell is very interested in money, and he came over to my house, and I don't spend a lot of time fixing up my house. I just don't. Doesn't matter. I'm tired. I've been depressed for 12 years. It's just not that important. And I actually found myself not caring. And I was like, Christy, this is so not like you. In fact, I was talking to my husband about it because we redid our cabinets last year and we have 2 of them still off. And I just started laughing and I said, I suppose we should finish the cabinet. And he just laughed too, because he knows what it's like for us. We struggle. And interestingly enough, on my birthday party, he got sick too. So he is, everybody hurried up and got up and left. And it was like, people, you don't understand. This is our life. I'm tired. He didn't feel good, but life goes on. We do all of the things that we do while we're sick, while we're grieving, while we're sad, all of that. So I would say to those of you, because I said there was going to be tips for coping, what I would say to you is don't be naive like I was about being triggered. I think that I would walk into the situation knowing that I would be triggered. And then the question becomes, how are you going to cope? And I don't like crowds anyway. I'm very uncomfortable networking and talking to people. Never been good at small talk. That's never been my thing. And so in both situations, I don't know how to not have a deep conversation. I don't know if you've noticed that from my podcast, but if I have a conversation with someone, it always goes deeper. It just goes, drops to the feelings, philosophy. Those are the things I like to talk about. I'm just not good at talking about the weather. And then as a woman, how do we all socialize? Well, how many children do you have? What are your children doing now? What is life like? And what are their careers like? And that is very uncomfortable for people that have lost children. And if you're a non-griever and you're listening, I urge you to not use that as, and I would say in counseling, we call it joining. So you try to join with your client, try to find things that you have in common and try to meet them at the place that they are. That's a lot of times the purpose of some of these conversation starters is let's join each other in our topics and our interest, and so we can make a connection with each other. So women have for years have done that about surrounding their children and the lives of their children, as if somehow they don't have interests outside of that. They're my nieces and my nephews, and I appreciate that, but it's also hard. It's also hard to know. And then I had a conversation with my granddaughter who asked me how many grandchildren I had. And I told her the truth. I have 3. She's like, oh, where is the other one? Well, the other one is in Louisiana with her mom. She goes, well, how come I haven't met her? And I had to tell her the truth. because I don't believe there should be any secrets on my side of the family. I can't control the other side of the family. And I said, because she doesn't know about us. She doesn't know that you're her cousin and that I'm her grandma. And she goes, they haven't told her yet? And I said, no, they haven't told her yet. She's like, oh. She's only 7. She goes, oh, okay. And then she walks away. But for me, that whole situation is just really quite sad. And at first, when I was first grieving, I thought it was just only me. And then I would hear in my support groups of other grandmas just like me who their adult children die and they don't get to see their grandchildren. And that is just heartbreaking, because not only do you lose your child, you lose that connection to that person, and losing that connection with that child and the grandchild can be very horrific for some people, especially if they had a close relationship. And I don't think the spouses realize how traumatic that is for the children. As if a close relationship with your grandparent is just something that you just can walk away from. And I had no choice. She didn't want to tell. The baby was only 3 months old when Christopher died, so I kind of understand. But she has a whole different life now. I'm lucky I get to watch from afar. But I don't know how else it would be different. So anyway, so at the family reunion. So the first thing, as I said before, is to be prepared to cope with your triggers. Be prepared. I was honest this time for the first time that I have been in years. I was honest about how I felt. I would just say things like, and I asked my brother and my sister if they went to the grave to see Christopher. And my sister said, not yet. I don't even know if my brother even attempted to go see him at his grave. That hurts. I don't know how I feel about that. But, I know that he's not there, or the spirit or the essence of him is not there. But I'm just not sure how they can't, or maybe it's too painful. Maybe I need to just be understanding of their grief process. And that's kind of where the difficulty lies, right? Because my dad lost a grandson, my brother lost a nephew, my sister lost a nephew, and then I lost a son. So where do all of these little grief pieces intersect in this relationship that you have? Because what if their coping is not talking about it? And my coping is, please understand, please talk about him, please know how much I miss him. And theirs is, well, we're not going to talk about it. It's too painful to talk about. It's too hard to talk about. Where does it all intersect, and how do you navigate that? And I don't have an answer. I wish I could, because these podcasts are designed to give you information, to give you tips, to give you support. And I think that's all I can give you is support, and say, I think everyone has to figure it out. Like, every personality is different, and how you interact with the people around you is different. So all I can tell you is to do the best you can for yourself, for how you are going to survive it. And maybe don't think about them so much, because everybody has a responsibility. And so I run into this all the time. And I want to emphasize this. And I actually run into this situation here recently in a personal. Each person is solely responsible for managing their own triggers and for managing their own emotions. So it is not your responsibility to monitor what you say or monitor what you do in order to make someone else feel better. Everybody has their own responsibilities about that. And so if you have a relative that says, don't talk about that because you make me uncomfortable, they're responsible for their reaction. You talk about it all you want, but they're responsible for managing their own emotions. That's the most critical part of that. And so I had someone say to me here recently in a personal relationship that I triggered them, and so I needed to monitor my own behavior. And I was like, no, that's not how that works. You manage your own triggers because you're moving through the world, and you can't expect the world to adapt to you. It's very narcissistic. You're adapting to the world. You adapt who you are. And if the trigger is still that acutely triggering, then get some counseling surrounding that. Get some therapy. Find someone to help you so you can navigate the world. Because part of this grief process we're going through is learning how to navigate the world. And this is why I do this podcast too, because I use my experiences to try to help other people figure out their own solutions. And it's one of the reasons why I ask people to come on the podcast, is so we can talk about it and they can give me advice and I can give, not advice, but support in what they're going through, so it can be a little bit easier for both of us. Because I firmly believe that our goal in life is that we want to be heard. We want someone to hear our story, person to accept the story. And I think that's part of the struggle of moms everywhere, because we are the ones living it. Last week I talked about Bowlby, who did research on attachment theory and grief. I don't give him much credibility because I don't know if he lost a child. Now, if you lost a child and you have something to say, or you did this research, then I most definitely want to hear what you have to say. Because to me, you have more credibility because you've walked in similar shoes as mine. You haven't walked in my shoes, but you've walked in similar shoes. And that's the other thing about picking a counselor too, is that you want a counselor that you can feel like they're walking along beside you. And a lot of times that's a shared experience. And I think that that is certainly most true about losing a child. Anyway, I got a little bit away from my rant, but I think it's important when you go into situations like these family situations to understand that the people around you are triggered too. But it's their responsibility to manage their emotions. It's not your responsibility to manage theirs. And so many times when I think about myself, I think about the fact that I keep my mouth shut because I don't want it to deal with the emotion that came towards me. And a lot of times it'll be anger or frustration or the rolling of the eyes. You know, all of those things that people do to signify that they're not listening to you. I try to avoid that. And I've noticed, especially in the last few months, that I have started coming out of the closet, so to speak, and talking about my grief. That knows these things, but I'll bet you she doesn't even know about them because I don't talk about these things. These are the things that I share with you. And it's a lot easier sharing with you because I don't see your reactions. I've never read any of the reviews. People don't leave me negative messages, so I think it must be fine. I know when people don't like my topic because they follow me or they unfollow me. But this podcast has become my safe space to talk about my grief. And I share things with you that I don't share with anyone else. And I feel like there's people out there, when I see every time my podcast has been listened to, I realize that I've reached someone. My hope is, and I trust, that there was something I said that keeps people coming back podcast after podcast, that it somehow gives them some meaning to their grief. And I think that's what all of us need. So when you're in these situations like I was at the family reunion, try to keep that in mind. Try to keep in mind that there's value to your story. Everyone's going to experience the death of someone sooner or later. They're probably not going to experience the death of a child, but you don't know that. You absolutely don't know that. And there might be something that you say that will be insightful to the other people around you. The other thing is give yourself permission to leave, which is, okay, before I go to this place. And so that was my moment. But plan out how long you're willing to stay. Are you willing to stay the 30 minutes? Are you willing to stay the 40, 45, an hour? And check in with yourself. I emphasize this all of the time, is knowing who you are. And I feel like I do a fairly good job of knowing who I am. But remember, I got triggered too. I just didn't realize it until afterwards. And so you're not always going to win being able to manage the triggers. But it's important, even if you don't realize it till after, that you can go back and say, okay, next time I will. So my next time I will is ask my son to come sooner, maybe. I don't know. maybe check in. I could have asked him beforehand and said, do you want me to wait? So if he had wanted me to wait, I could have not come until he came, and we could just sit around and check in and do all of those kind of things. I don't know. There's all kinds of different things you could have done. Sit by people that have some meaning for you, someone that you feel safe with. So I had my husband. My sister was there for a period of time, and then she left. So focus on safety. What makes you feel emotionally safe? We took a bunch of family pictures before we got there, which I'm glad, because we didn't have a chance to take family pictures while we were there. It was my dad's 80th birthday, so we don't know how long Dad has. Every day is a blessing. That's what I'm starting to realize. Every day that I get older is a blessing. Because this birthday, I was like, I don't like the way I look. And then I took those family pictures. I got two-tone hair. I was like, I have two-tone hair. But then I always go back to, Christopher didn't get to be this old. He didn't get to be 26. He didn't get to be 27. And all of those ages in between to my age. And that just, it makes me grateful that I got to. And after Chris died, I got in this habit of reading the obituaries, and I look at people that are the same age I am and that are dying, and I'm just walking through life with a sense of gratefulness. And I think I said that at the reunion too. I said, just grateful to have another day. And I don't have chronic illness, or at least not one that's going to kill me. But I still want to walk around with this gratitude that even though life is tough and life is hard, I want to be grateful that I lived another day. Because the closer I get to the end of life, so I'm closer to the end of life than I am to the beginning of life, I become incredibly grateful. So if I make 80 like my dad, I'll be lucky. It's not many people make it that far. So in a nutshell, recognize that you're going to be triggered. Don't take on the responsibility of trying to manage other people's feelings when you're talking about your deceased child. That is their responsibility. Find people that are emotionally safe. And take care of yourself. If you need to leave after 15 minutes, leave. Assess it beforehand and have a plan. So when it becomes too overwhelming or it becomes too tired, that you are able to walk out the door with no regrets. Decide for you what the goal is. I hope this podcast has been helpful today. Thank you for listening. This is Christy from Grieving Insomniacs, and I'll see you next week. And as always, I would love to hear some of your experiences with grief. There's things that you want to talk through, things that you want to talk about. DM me on Instagram or on Facebook. I'm on both of those. And then I'm on grievinginsomniacs.com, or grievinginsomniacs@gmail.com. I'm not always checking that one, so it's probably better on Instagram or Facebook because I get it more immediately. I wish you well for the rest of the week, and thanks for listening.